4, abuses of the national security state. In the aftermath of 9/11, we've seen a whole range of serious affronts to academic freedom. We just had Hillary Clinton happily just lifted the bar on travel for 2 foreign scholars, Tariq Ramadan, who did it, and Adam Habib, both of whom did high-profile events in New York City. As a result, others have not had that ban lifted, and the administration, I must say, I feel that this is the most decisive evidence of my own political naivete. I thought by now they would have lifted that ban completely. I really thought that was a no-brainer, but it hasn't happened. And obviously, surveillance and work and hard effort by all of us needs to continue, Democratic or Republican administrations. Warrantless wiretaps have proliferated. Federal efforts to prevent communication with foreign scholars are an obvious and dramatic instance of a violation of academic freedom, but there are other issues still at stake. The federal government still insists on the right to do warrantless, evidenceless searches of your laptop and your papers when you cross a border. The ACLU is about to file a suit against the federal government to try to protect your privacy if they have no cause. In other words, a search without cause of your papers is something that we feel should be resisted. So there are just many areas in which the national security state can threaten elements of academic freedom. 5, administration restrictions on the use of communication technology. And it's pretty clear over the last 20 years, you can see this. You can see it in part in AAUP policy statements, because as new forms of technology come into existence, we really need to adapt academic freedom to meet them and make the arguments of why academic freedom should apply. Of course, there are many schools, of course, that to consider your email to have no protection whatsoever. They consider it to belong to the administration. We think that it should have the same protection as first-class mail does. Repeatedly, institutions have resisted faculty and graduate student rights to publish as they choose on university websites. In other words, not granting you the same freedom to publish on a university website that would be granted you in publishing in a journal. We've had 2 huge battles about that at Illinois, and that needs continued vigilance. And as new technology arises, the issues, administrators will say, academic freedom doesn't apply to this. If they meant academic freedom to apply to it, they would have put that in the Constitution. But we have to do the hard work to get that done. 6, unwarranted research oversight. And I'm referring especially to institutional review boards, IRBs, that were set up largely to provide protections to human subjects for medical research, but have on some campuses been expanded to apply to humanities and social science research that involves interviewing or surveying human subjects. And there are absurd things like, faculty members doing research with an indigenous population somewhere in the world, handing them a sort of, approval form, a long approval form to read and sign when there's no cultural understanding of what the thing means at all. And once again, one of my favorite examples comes from the University of Illinois, where the IRB blocked a standard intro to anthropology lesson, which was that students were to practice interviewing when they went home for Thanksgiving. They were to interview their parents as their first practice interview. And the IRB said that the anthropology department had not carefully enough thought through the psychological damage that interview could do to the parents. I responded at the time by saying that if there were any families anywhere that had not already so thoroughly indulged in this form of psychological damage, I had certainly never encountered one, and that the additional damage done by the interview in Thanksgiving seemed to me negligible. But the IRB got it in their heads that, there's great psychological resistance going home and asking mom and pop some questions. 7, neoliberal assaults on academic disciplines. As the corporate university increasingly adopts the belief that market forces should set academic priorities, disciplines less able to raise outside funds, and this is an argument that I've already been encountering on campus here with only a couple of hours on site, concerned about the capacity of disciplines to raise money to fund their operations. These disciplines are increasingly faced with downsizing or literal elimination. And obviously, humanities and interpretive social science faculty are the most frequent victims. 8, managerial ideology. The rise of a separate class of career administrators and the substantial increase in their sheer numbers, which in some campuses is just unbelievable, has helped fuel a belief that faculty are not really full partners in the educational enterprise, but rather resources to be controlled and managed. It's also an international phenomenon, and it typically leads to efforts to circumvent faculty governance or diminish the impact of faculty input. It makes some administrators less willing to hire full-time faculty. There is now something like a kind of separate social class of career administrators. Their number has increased to the point that they can sustain parties and picnics together. They socialize together. I think they breed together, reproduce themselves that way. And it's really quite different from the days when there was a much smaller number of administrators who sometimes cycled back from and back to the faculty, rather than being career administrators of a vast number who in some cases have never set foot in a classroom. I'm sorry, you shouldn't be an administrator if you have never taught. I mean, you have no idea what the business is about if you have never taught. And if a decade goes by and you haven't taught, I think you're also in trouble. You certainly will have no understanding of where students are coming from if you never encounter them in a classroom. 9, circumvention of shared governance. Shared governance reinforces academic freedom by establishing and securing the environment that sustains it. It refers to the negotiated agreements and processes that structure the relationship between the legal authority of trustees and the professional expertise of faculty, with primary authority ceded, despite the legal power of the Board of Trustees, ceded to the faculty in areas like hiring and curriculum. The AAUP has defined shared governance in a series of key documents since 1920. 10, globalization. Globalization, of course, is an historical, political, and economic process that not only impacts higher education, but it also opens opportunities to transform the character of higher education. As universities seek to market their product in other countries and now to establish satellite campuses abroad, they may be tempted to abandon the standards and structures that supported academic freedom and shared governance in their home institutions. And the AAUP has issued a statement on that last year, and our very active chapter at NYU, I'm pleased to say, you may have noticed this a couple of months ago, succeeded in getting the administration to say that it would honor a series of shared governance, academic freedom, and equally important, workplace standards in its Abu Dhabi campus, which was something we really were pressing for. And what we added to that statement, after great stress, was a demand that fundamental workers' rights for the people building the campus had to be observed. In other words, you walk home with a brick, you don't get your hand chopped off, a few things like that. In other words, there are real issues, workplace issues that we take for granted that cannot be taken for granted in many foreign workplaces. And so that commitment is also built into that statement. But more broadly, international capital frequently sees higher education either as an investment opportunity or as a service industry for international finance. And that's in part why the IMF often demands that before a country gets a loan, they increase their percentage of contingent teachers, part-time teachers in their higher education system, because then the kinds of positions that international finance needs, as those positions change, can be more readily produced by institutions who fire the faculty members who can't teach that particular specialization and just quickly hire people who can do the required one. 11, I know this is considered an overstatement, but not for me, opposition to human rights. If health care, a living wage, investment in retirement systems, safe working conditions, and the right for employee groups to bargain collectively are basic human rights, and according to the UN, some of these are basic human rights, then universities that deny people those rights have ceased to be admirable or ideal institutions. Many of the values higher education has traditionally promoted, from free inquiry to a commitment to the common good, cannot remain credible if a university adopts the employment policies of a ruthless corporation, seeking to pay people the least amount possible.